Hello everybody, welcome to Bitcoin Not Crypto. You can find me on Twitter X at @ForestTotal. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about a news article that was released recently on Mara, which is Marathon Digital Holdings. It's the biggest mining company for Bitcoin out there. They have 50 exahash of hash rate. And they recently disclosed that they are lending against a portion of their Bitcoin holding. I have the article up here. I'm going to get into that. But first, I just want to tell you about where I buy my Bitcoin, which is Bitcoin Well. Check it out in the link in the description. If you use my code, you'll actually get yourself some free Bitcoin. They have the lowest spreads. They're a non-custodial exchange. They have non-KYC. I tried to tighten up that ad for you. I've gotten some complaints about how long my ads are at the beginning. So hopefully that was okay. I can't be a breatharian. I gotta pay the rent somehow. So here's the article here. It's by the Miner Mag. There's a few other articles as well that talked about this, but essentially Marathon has lent out 7,377 Bitcoin to generate a yield to third parties. So multiple different people are borrowing this Bitcoin. Now, why would somebody want to borrow Bitcoin? Well, institutions, they might want to get exposure to it, but not buy it. So they'll pay basically a percentage rate to just have access to it. So they'd pay like an interest basically. Exchanges as well. They might be low on their balance, so they would borrow from a holder like this, pay that interest rate, and then give them back the Bitcoin at a certain point. That's kind of my guess. I don't have really any more information about that right now, but I mean, Bitcoin into the future is pristine collateral, right? Like it is evidence of a hard asset that is worth a ton of money. A ton of value in there. So it will be collateralized. People will lend against it into the future, and already they currently are. Their total stack is 44,893, and so they've lent out 16% of their total reserves. So a kind of smaller amount. I wouldn't say this puts them at a huge risk, although it does put them at some risk. And lending Bitcoin at this stage, I think, is risky. I think it's going to continually get de-risked. But right now, I still think this is a risky strategy by Mara. And I actually think they do quite a lot of risky things. They mine Caspa and they use that and sell it to buy Bitcoin. Maybe it's worked, but the supply issuance of Caspa changes every single month. It goes down. They have like a halving basically every month. And so the profitability of mining rigs goes down like crazy. So they're kind of taking on a risk like that because we don't know if Caspa is going to end up being a store of value when it's really geared to being a peer-to-peer exchange. It's very, very small cap like crypto, right? So Bitcoin, much more stable, much more long-term future, I would say, than something like Caspa. Basically, Bitcoin is the one, right? So if they can mine that profitably, then they're good. And they've also acquired basically energy producing assets like wind farms, which they can say, okay, well, we can earn, or we can basically put our unprofitable miners here because we generate electricity at a zero cost. Well, there is maintenance cost to that. I don't think they're being like fully transparent about what it takes to run a wind farm. Turbines end up needing to be maintained. They end up breaking 10, 20, 30 years down the line. And then they either need to be recycled or disposed of. And so I don't think it's really like that transparent what Mara is doing. I think they're taking more risks. But they're fairly established, right? Like I said, they are the biggest miner, and they do have all of these older rigs as well because they've been in it for some time. All of this to be said, I'm not a big fan of them, but I will just say what they're doing here is they've earned some income. So they talked about doing this in Q4, but we don't have of 2024, but we don't have the statement for the interest rate, or sorry, the interest income generated. What we have is the interest income generated here is $3.9 million from Q3. So maybe they've added to that. Maybe in Q3 they had less Bitcoin that they were lending out. Maybe in Q4 here, when this was reported, they've lent out more. So, but what I've done is I've taken that $3.9 million that they earned in Q3, and I overlaid that with some numbers to calculate how much interest they're actually earning, the percentage rate that they're earning from this. Now, this is very rough. This is just a calculation that I have done, and we'll take a look at it here. So if they've earned 3.9 interest in Q3 of 2024, I times that by 4. Basically, that will equal an annual earnings of 15.6 million, right? These are all just rough numbers. 16% of their holdings, right? I've marked that at the price of Bitcoin at the end of December of 2024, which is $93,429.20. So their 16% of their holdings is worth $689.23 million USD. So if we play out their Q3 interest earnings, that would essentially mean that they're earning 2.26% on this Bitcoin. Now, that could be entirely inaccurate, and I think it's probably a little bit low. They probably had less Bitcoin they were lending out in Q3. They probably had more. I think this is probably a little inaccurate of a number, but it kind of gives us something to go off of. That probably wouldn't be that far, right? What is the Fed funding rate at right now? So the Fed funds rate is 4.5% right now. So if we look at this, 2.26 is probably really low. The amount of interest that they're earning from their Bitcoin. And Bitcoin still needs to work its way into the financial industry a little bit more. There needs to be approving for banks to be able to hold Bitcoin. I think when these certain things happen, the interest rate that companies could get for lending out your Bitcoin would be higher than this, 2.26. So this is definitely calculated on the very low side. And if we look at that there, we can kind of see that if they did that on 100% of their Bitcoin, 100% of their Bitcoin is worth right now 4.19 billion. They would earn 94.7 million annually off of this at a 2.26% rate. So this number here would just get higher based on the amount of interest rate they could charge for lending out their Bitcoin. Now, obviously, no company would want to lend out 100% of their Bitcoin. That's total degeneracy. 16% right now in this industry, in this environment that we're in, I think is still high. I don't lend out any of my personal Bitcoin. There is opportunity to do that, but I think it's still just really early. We can see BlockFi, we can see Three Arrows Capital, we can see FTX, we can see these things having blown up, all from lending, all from paper Bitcoin, all from basically a downturn in the market and being over leveraged based on that lending and that percentage rate that they give back. If they are only getting a 2.26% for their Bitcoin holdings, this is really low. So maybe it doesn't fall into the side of people taking that money or that Bitcoin and buying and trading meme coins with it, like they were with BlockFi, the people that were paying the lending rate of BlockFi. But I do just still think that we're very early in this stage. But this does show how there's some untapped earning potential for Bitcoin treasury companies. Now, what's interesting about this is other companies that just hold cash on their balance sheet, they do earn interest from that cash because a lot of times they'll park it in T-bills, which are really short-term treasury bills, and they'll have pure cash to pay expenses, and then whatever's left over and for their longer burn rate, right, their cash holdings, they'll hold in something that acquires some sort of interest rate. So it kind of makes sense that Bitcoin is going to end up being like that, right? Some of it'll get locked into these different type of lending products as collateral, just as the cash is for businesses right now. Now, the problem with cash is that it doesn't appreciate in value. Bitcoin, you don't even need to earn any rate on it, and you're going to outperform cash that earns interest right? These T-bills that earn interest. So right now, I think Mara is taking a more risk than it needs to. Of course, there's always going to be risk when you lend something out. Now that risk can come down and the interest rate can go up, which makes the risk more worth it. People are a little bit obsessed with earning yield. I've gotten a few questions about that recently. Oh, how should I earn yield for my Bitcoin and all this? And to me, that's just a signal of where we are in this market where, okay, do you really need to be earning yield on your Bitcoin when we just went up 140% in a year? Like, it's just crazy, right? It's just crazy to be thinking about yield at this point, especially with the infrastructure that we have. There are companies, and I don't endorse any of these. I've never used any of these, but there's companies like Ledin up here in Canada, and their strategy for borrowing is transparent, unlike BlockFi. Now, those ones are more for borrowing against your Bitcoin. There's other ones that earn yield and interest off of Bitcoin, but a lot of them are really risky. I think borrowing against your Bitcoin it's a little bit more transparent with Ledin. That's kind of a different subject, but essentially you're paying a pretty high interest rate, and people are giving you USDT, like a stable coin, for the amount of Bitcoin that you've put in, and you're paying like 11% for this loan, and the person that gave you the USD is earning 10% of that, and then Ledin is taking the 1%, acting as the intermediary. So at least you can see where those percentages are coming from and going with something like that. But that's borrowing against your Bitcoin. This here is earning interest from your Bitcoin, so you'd have to be on the other side of it, but those people are earning interest for their USDT stable coins, not their Bitcoin. So maybe there's some services like that. I don't really know about them, because to me, I don't really care about them. I don't want to earn 2.26% on my Bitcoin holdings. I want to hold my Bitcoin in self-sovereign self-custody. That's important to me, way more important than a 2.26% yield. I think Mara is taking a risk that it doesn't need to right now. I think it's kind of interesting that they're doing it. I think it's interesting to look at these numbers. And yes, I know my numbers are not correct here because I just don't have all of the accurate numbers. So this is what I had to go off of to calculate this 2.26% interest rate. Hopefully we'll get some numbers in the future. I can re-put these in and look at it again. And that's about it. I am going to do a interesting experiment where I move this out to what would happen if MicroStrategy did this. How much money would MicroStrategy make if they did 16% or if they did 100%? And what would that look like on their earnings per share? How would this actually affect some of the important accounting measurements that people look at and that MicroStrategy gets criticized for, right? Negative earnings for so many quarters in the past. What would happen if they just lent out at an interest rate like this some of their Bitcoin? Now that's going to be tomorrow's video. I didn't want to combine that one. I already have all the information. I'm just going to shoot this MicroStrategy one here. So stay tuned for that, because I'm going to release that tomorrow at 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, like I always try to release my videos at. And yeah, this one I just wanted to do about this Mara situation, lending their Bitcoin. Is it kind of worth it? If not, and tomorrow's video will be about what happens if MicroStrategy does something like this. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you on the next one.